Correct. So आज के सेशन में, to be precise, we shall be discussing about a few of the parameters or a few of the concepts which are used in the field of financial modeling and valuation. Right. So I hopefully my screen is visible to everybody. My whiteboard is visible. MS Word. Maybe I'll just reshare it once again. I'll just enlarge the board for everybody. And I'll start to share my screen. Hopefully it is visible. And ideally, see, whenever we talk about financial modeling or valuation, right? Because it's all about trying to value a company, preparing equity research reports, talking about cash flows, talking about discounting those cash flows, right? But one major aspect which is very crucial, right, in the field of financial modeling valuation is about the DCF modeling. That is the discounted cash flow analysis. करेक्ट. हम डीसीएफ मॉडलिंग के बारे में हम डीप डाइव बात करेंगे, लाइक विल बी गोइंग डीप डाइव टुवर्ड्स अंडरस्टैंडिंग सच स्टफ प्रैक्टिकली एज वेल, कि कैसे होता है डीसीएफ मॉडल, हाउ डू वी प्रोजेक्ट द फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज, हाउ डू वी डिस्काउंट द फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज, ऑन व्हाट बेसिस वी टेंड टू डिस्काउंट, हाउ द डिस्काउंट रेट इज कैलकुलेटेड, ऑल दीज थिंग्स वी लर्न अबाउट practically as well via the Excel file, right? But a few of the things are there which help you to understand the concepts that we shall be doing in practically in the Excel file in somewhat later sessions, right? So whenever we are talking about the DCF modeling, the discounted cash flow analysis. So the discounted cash flow analysis is the most important method which is used to value a company. It is the most important, most genuine method, I would say, which is used to value a company. There are different other methods also. We talked about those methods in the previous session also, like when we talked about the valuation multiples, right? That's much more of a kind of a relative valuation, right? We tend to call that as the RV method, where we tend to talk about these ratios of price to earning ratio, price to book value, PEG, EV to EBITDA, price to sales. So all these kind of multiples, they comprise or they come under the purview of the RV method of valuation, right? Relative method of valuation. Again, that is also important. We talked about the metrics in the previous session, the multiples in the previous session. Like we shall be discussing about how to apply those things practically for different companies also in the later sessions. But ignoring as of today the method of relative valuation. Relative valuation को आज के लिए ignore करते हैं. The most important method of valuation in the field of finance, in the field of asset management, in the field of investment banking is DCF method, discounted cash flow analysis. If we talk about the RV method, relative valuation method, it's more of a pricing method. You aren't valuing a company. You are just trying to assign a multiple to your company based upon some other company's valuation, right? You might take into consideration the price to earning multiple of some other company, right? You have your own earnings based upon the price to earning multiple of some other company, and based upon the earnings of your company, you might ascertain the price for your company. I'll give you one classic example what happens in the RV method. So, for example, if my company is into the IT industry, right? Assumingly, if my company belongs to the IT industry, right? My company is X and the company X belongs to the IT industry, right? And my company is unlisted. My company is unlisted. I want to come up with the IPO. I want to get my company listed upon the stock exchanges, NSE, BSE. मुझे कहीं भी अपनी कंपनी को लिस्ट करना है मार्केट में, right? Assumingly my company is profitable. So many of the companies that tend to get listed on the market nowadays are the non-profitable companies or the loss-making companies. But assumingly, for the sake of simplicity to make you understand, right, this company is a profitable company. अब कंपनी अगर प्रॉफिटेबल है तो कंपनी का ईपीएस भी होगा. कंपनी अगर प्रॉफिटेबल है तो कंपनी का ईपीएस भी होगा, तो कंपनी विल आल्सो बी हैविंग ईपीएस. एंड वी ऑल नो कि व्हाट इज ईपीएस एज ऑफ नाउ. We talked about the different valuation multiples and the financial ratios or metrics in the previous sessions, right? EPS हमको पता क्या है, right? EPS is earnings per share. EPS is a proxy for profit. Higher the profit, higher would be the EPS. And we also know that how do we calculate EPS? It's the profit after tax divided by the outstanding shares for that one specific company. तो हमारे पास इस कंपनी एक्स का ईपीएस होगा. 100% we have the EPS of this company since this company is a profitable company. But the only problem that we are facing is what should be the price of this company? इस कंपनी का कितना प्राइस होना चाहिए, कौन से प्राइस पे ये कंपनी एनएससी या बीएससी पे लिस्ट होनी चाहिए। सो वन वे इज यूजिंग द डीसीएफ, राइट? विल कम टू डीसीएफ, क्या करना होता है क्या नहीं करना होता। बट वन सिंपल मेथड which the analysts tend to deploy in these kind of complex scenarios or these kind of complex situations in which the valuation has become very tricky and complex, they simply just tend to use the RV method. They simply just tend to say यार हम DCF यूज नहीं करेंगे, let's use the RV method of valuation, right? So they tend to use the relative valuation method, relative valuation method, ठीक है। अब रिलेटिव वैल्यूएशन मेथड में टाइम भी बचता है, एफर्ट्स भी बचते हैं, और दिमाग भी कम लगता है, टू बी ऑनेस्ट। इट इज जस्ट वर ट्राइंग टू कंपेयर योर टारगेट कंपनी और माई टारगेट कंपनी और आर टारगेट कंपनी, इन दिस केस विच इज एक्स, with some other company in the similar industry. So the major principle of relative valuation is you can only compare your company, which you are pricing or valuing per se, with a company in the same industry only. That is, if my company is an IT company, I can compare my IT company with Infosys only, with Coforge only, with Persistent only, right? Or with the Nifty IT index. I cannot compare my ex IT company with a company in the FMCG industry or pharma industry or automobile industry. And that is a basic premise of valuation or pricing per se in this case. You need to compare your target company with a similar company in the same industry only. And that is what the methods of valuation tend to call the basic principles or the list of valuation. You have to maintain consistency. You have to compare your multiple with a similar multiple in the same industry only. And that is what the relative valuation principle or the relative valuation method also says. अब, the problem that might come into place is if I compare my company with TCS, those companies might not be comparable because my company is still a small company. The company will get listed upon the stock exchanges. It might take years and years to reach to that market cap of TCS, or maybe a quarter of a century per se. Correct? Because still there are many companies in the small cap space or micro cap space in the IT businesses which have not yet become large cap or even mid cap for the past 20 years or 30 years. It might depend upon how the promoters lead the business. And the quality of the business, the growth idea of the business, the longevity of the business, and the pricing matters, right? कि how the promoters are supporting the business, how good the promoter is, how good the management is, how they're supporting the business to make it as a large cap company or a mega cap company per se, like a TCS, Infosys, or Wipro, or Tech Mahindra. Like just for example, no stock recommendation. Correct. So the best simple sense is what I can do. I can simply compare my company with a similar company, maybe in the mid cap space or a smaller cap space. Correct. So, assumingly, the investment bankers or the analysts who have been employed, right, to ascertain the value of the company will be compare my company with similar companies in the same industry. Now, assumingly, a company Y is listed already, and that is closer to my company. It might happen the company Y also got listed recently only, right? It might be a certain few years that the company might have got listed. So I will be comparing the price to earning multiple of company Y, which is listed already, almost same in comparison with company X. Now, no company will be exactly similar. So the major target is to find a closer to similar companies. Correct? So I find this Y company. अब मैं assume करता हूं कि प्राइस टू अर्निंग मल्टीपल इस कंपनी का चल रहा है 50, because IT companies nowadays they tend to trade at a very high valuations. Assume कर रहा हूं मैं, it is again a hypothetical number, the price to earning multiple of this listed Y company is 50. ठीक है। अब मेरे पास अपनी कंपनी का प्राइस है ही नहीं, अब मेरी कंपनी तो एक्स है ना, मैं क्या करूं? बट आई हैव द ईपीएस ऑफ माई कंपनी, I will have the EPS of my company. The analyst will calculate the EPS for that company for the past year. So if my past year's EPS had been, assume करो कि कंपनी का पैट 100 करोड़ का था, शेयर 10 है, ठीक है, मान लो कि 10 का ईपीएस है कंपनी का, कंपनी एक्स हैज एन ईपीएस ऑफ 10. नाउ माय मेजर टास्क इज टू कैलकुलेट द प्राइस ऑफ माय कंपनी. नाउ प्राइस टू अर्निंग का फॉर्मूला क्या होता है? इट इज सिंपली द मार्केट प्राइस, द करंट मार्केट प्राइस ऑफ दैट शेयर एज ऑफ टुडे divided by EPS, the current market price as of today divided by EPS, the price to earning of the similar company Y is 50. अपनी कंपनी का प्राइस मुझे निकालना है, ईपीएस मुझे अपनी कंपनी का पता है 10। 50 is the price to earning of not my company. It is the price to earning of company Y, which is closer to the company X, which I want to get listed on the stock exchanges, or similar to this company X. Correct? Price, this I have to find out for my target company X. 10 EPS is of my company only. Simply, I can do some cross multiplication and calculate the price for my company. It comes out to be 50 into 10, 500. It comes out to be 50 into 10, 500. So 500 is the price of company X. Very simple method of valuing a company or pricing a company. And that is why many people in the market tend to call it as pricing a company and not valuing a company. Even I call it as pricing a company. Because just on the basis of some other company's valuation or a price to earning multiple, I've just tried to ascertain the price of my company. So in this case, I'm just pricing my company. I'm not valuing my company. Value and price is different. Price is something what we pay and value is something what we get. Right? I'll repeat my point. Price is something that we pay and value is something what we get. Right? In this case, in the RV method, in relative valuation method, we're trying to price a company and not value a company. Very simple method to do it. Many of the analysts in the market, just to save time, tend to price the company. Because many of the promoters also, founders also, or the leads of the company also want their companies to get priced. They want the highest price for their company in the market. Because जितना ज़्यादा price होगा, उतना they can show to public that there is a demand for our shares in the market. करेक्ट. कम प्राइस होगा तो लगेगा यार कि क्या पता कंपनी इतनी स्ट्रांग नहीं है, द कंपनी इज नॉट सो मच स्ट्रांग, द प्रमोटर्स आर नॉट सो मच backing up the company, the price is too low, demand is very less. So all these things are being done at the back end. I'm not saying that for all the companies this is done, but for many of the companies. कंपनी अगर लॉस मेकिंग होगी, इफ हाइपोथेटिकली द कंपनी इज लॉस मेकिंग, देन प्राइस टू अर्निंग कैन नॉट बी यूज्ड. मे बी अ प्राइस टू सेल्स माइट बी यूज्ड. करेक्ट. और ईवी टू EBITDA might be used. Because many of the companies first target to become EBITDA positive, right? First, the companies target to become EBITDA positive. What is EBITDA? I've talked about this term deep dive in my previous sessions. Watch that. EBITDA की मैंने deep dive बात करी है. So companies aim to get EBITDA positive first, then they aim to get EBIT positive, earnings before interest and tax, also called as the operating profit, and then they tend to become PAT positive. That's the profit after tax or the net profit. Correct? So इस मेथड में इतना तुम्हें पता चल रहा है, it is pricing and not valuing. And what we need to do is value a company because valuation take time. And whenever someone is doing a valuation, then this method of DCF starts to kick in. Discounted cash flow analysis, DCF method, or the equity research reports which are being prepared, or the financial modeling and valuation which is being done on Excel, calculating the future cash flows, FCFF, FCFE, discount rate, XYZ stuff. All these are based on DCF. We'll learn about FCFF, FCFE, discount rate, not to worry for that, but just to tell you in general. Correct. This takes time. This takes hours and hours, sometimes weeks and weeks of efforts. Correct. Because it is time consuming, but it gives you something, 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 which is the most appropriate value of a company and not pricing. So DCF gives you a very, very appropriate value or a very appropriate value of a company, right? Which is something upon which investors can ponder upon. Something upon which tells you about the fundamentals of the company, right? If you are trying to value a company based upon the company's fundamentals, because that is what value is. यहाँ पे we did pricing. Pricing में we just ascertain the price of our company with the price of some other company के basis पर. We aren't seeing the company's fundamentals. We aren't bothered about the company's cash flows, future projections, quality of the business, the company's longevity, promoters, management, nothing. We haven't even seen the P&L of that company. We just know that the EPS is this, but we haven't analyzed the profit and loss statement for that company. We haven't analyzed the balance sheet of that company. We haven't even opened the annual report of that company. I'll come to your question, Isha. Right? We haven't even done that. हमने करा ही नहीं है. वो सब करे बगैर. That is the most important critical analysis for that company. Without even doing that, we have just tried to price that company, and pricing is something which is not reasonable. Correct? So, in a DCF modeling, in a discounted cash flow analysis, you tend to value a company and not price the company. In case of valuation, you are focusing towards the company's fundamentals. You're focusing upon the company's cash flows, The full-fledged profit and loss statement, balance sheet, promoters, annual report, everything. And based upon that, we're trying to ascertain a value of a company based upon which the investors or the management can ponder upon. And DCF tends to give you something which is called as intrinsic value. DCF tends to give you something which is called as intrinsic value of a business. A very popular term in the market, intrinsic value. What exactly is intrinsic value? Intrinsic value, as I told, is the most basic fundamental value of a company. Intrinsic value is the most basic fundamental value of a company. Fundamentals. Usually, when we tend to hear a CNBC TV 18 or Z Business, NDTV Profit, right? Many people tend to talk about कि कंपनी के फंडामेंटल्स अच्छे हैं. फंडास द फंडामेंटल्स, राइट? अगर फंडामेंटल स्ट्रांग है, इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू उसके बेसिस पर कैलकुलेट करी गई है, then it is the most appropriate value of that company on which we can ponder upon, on which we can have a thought upon, right? So intrinsic value is nothing but it's the most basic fundamental value of a company, which takes into account all the major fundamentals of that company, be it cash flows, be it P&L, be it balance sheet, be it the promoters, be it management, annual report, everything we have taken into account and ascertain the intrinsic value of a company, which is the closer to fair value of a company. And based upon this, we can get to know that whether our company is undervalued or overly valued. I'll give you a small example and then I'll jump to questions in the chat box as well. Now the thing is, if I calculate the intrinsic value, I'll tell you how to calculate that. Not to worry for that. But assumingly you did all the backend calculations of DCF, right? Sab mata fodi kari, and you got the calculation at the end as what? You got the calculation as the intrinsic value as 100 rupees, for example. It means the most basic fair value of that company is 100 rupees. Correct. Now, if in the market the company is trading at 120 rupees, if in the market the company is trading at 120 rupees, we might say or we might think oh, the company might be overvalued because intrinsic most appropriate fair value of the company is 100. But the company is trading at 120. मार्केट में तो कंपनी महंगे पर बिक रही है, राइट? 20 रुपए महंगे पर बिक रही है. सो अ टाइम माइट कम that 120 might fall back to 100 rupees. Not always, it is always a possibility. All these kinds of equity research reports, the financial modeling and valuation to ascertain the intrinsic value of a company, to gauge that whether your company is undervalued, overvalued, are based upon assumptions and estimates. You might be wrong also, right? It is always an assumption. It might happen, but it might not always happen. Correct. And ये भी हो सकता है that the intrinsic value came out to be 100 and the share in the market is trading at 90. Then we might assume that the share is undervalued. तो मार्केट में सस्ते पर बिक रहा है, इस शेयर को खरीद लो, because the point will come when 90 will get back to 100, when 90 will reach to 100. Now the possibility, either of the possibilities can hamper on both the sides, can occur on both the sides. It might happen that 90 never reaches 100. It comes down to 80, 70, 60, कंपनी बर्बाद हो जाए, कंपनी बैंकक्रप्ट हो जाए, पेनी स्टॉक बन जाए. And on the other hand, it might also happen the price of 120 might not ever fall back to 100. It might just keep on increasing throughout the lifetime. 140, 150, 200, 250, because the company might be high growth stock. The people in the market might be the people in the market might be assuming or might be taking that sentiment into account that this company's stock will do really well. If there is so much positive sentiment, the stock is a high growth stock, giving you multi-bagger returns year after year, cash flows are strong, profits are strong, management is strong, investments are strong, future outlook is strong, the government support might be there via some PLIs or different schemes, right? That 120 might not come down to 100 anytime. It might continue rising, right? And that might indicate the growth prospects of that stock. The stock might be high growth quality stock, high growth and quality stock, right? So these things just help us to ascertain ki intrinsic value kya hai, and also helps us to judge the current intrinsic value or a fair value, the current market valuation, that whether our company is undervalued or overly valued, right? So that is something which is important and which we should know. We had one question from Isha.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Yes. Sir, I wanted to know that if a company is making loss, you said we can't use the PE ratio first, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
we have to like calculate the market price of that company on the basis of the other ratios like EBITDA and the other you taught.
प्राइस टू सेल्स एंड EBITDA, बिकॉज कंपनी तो प्रॉफिटेबल है ही नहीं, राइट?
Okay, so
तो
if
कंपनी,
sorry to cut you.
कैरी ऑन, बोलो।
Yeah, so if we want to know the value, so we will use those ratios first if the market, matlab if the company is not doing well in the market that at that point of time.
नॉट एग्जैक्टली, मतलब कि नॉट डूइंग वेल, द मेजर थिंग इज इफ द कंपनी इज नॉट प्रॉफिटेबल, राइट?
Hmm.
द पैट इज नेगेटिव और EBIT इज नेगेटिव, ठीक है? तो उन केसेस में हम ईपीएस तो यूज ही नहीं कर सकते, राइट? वी
Hmm.
कांट यूज ईपीएस, करेक्ट? तो इफ वी कांट यूज ईपीएस, वी कांट यूज द बॉटम लाइन ऑफ अ बिजनेस, दैट्स योर पैट. So in that case, like we shall be using just the top line of the business, right? The top line
Hmm.
is your sales or revenue,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
तो जो भी इनिशियल कंपनीज जो मार्केट में भी लिस्ट हुई थी, राइट, लाइक एटर्नल, राइट, previously Eternal, or I would say Nika, you had Policy Bazaar, right? PB Fintech is the parent company of Policy Bazaar, right? Mama Earth, right? So all those kind of companies which have turned to be near profitable as of now, all these companies were loss-making companies. Paytm,
Hmm.
correct? So when these companies came up in the market initially, the analysts couldn't value such companies based upon price to earning, right? Because EPS was negative. तो उनको प्राइस टू सेल्स पे वैल्यू करा गया। फॉर एग्जाम्पल जोमेटो कितनी सेल्स करता है, बिकॉज जब जोमेटो लिस्ट हुआ तब तो इटर्नल था ही नहीं, राइट?
Hmm.
जस्ट ट्राइंग टू वैल्यू देयर फूड डिलीवरी बिजनेस, दैट्स इट. But now they've folded into like different businesses, right? Into booking businesses, into hyper pure, into some kind of concerts and different things. Like बहुत businesses हो गए हैं उनके अब. Correct. So initially, when a company is loss-making business, it doesn't always mean the company is bad or the company is not doing well. Because initially, your startup companies or tech companies will be loss-making businesses. Because
Hmm.
whatever they are making, they shall be spending that amount towards the capital expenditure, buying new technology, buying new assets, buying new machinery, plant, building, AI, software technologies. Right? So initially, there will be a cash burning machine. And that is the reason why these companies initially aren't the profit making companies. It takes years and years for them, maybe like 5 to 7 years for them to turn out to be break even when the revenues are equal to your income, sorry, to your expenses, or to at least turn out to be the profitable company. Because initially वो loss ही make करेंगे. Majorly many companies tend to make losses like in the initial years, or all the companies tend to make losses. Either they prefer to get listed in the loss making period, or when they turn out to be profitable, then they prefer to get listed. But all these startup companies that came after COVID, they prefer to got themselves listed during the loss making phase because cash burn बहुत था. They had to expand, they had to open new stores, and different things were going on, right? The capital expenditure in companies का बहुत ज़्यादा था, and that was the reason why the cash flows were negative, why the profits were not there. They were loss making companies. So all these scenarios were playing on in the market that time. तो उन companies को price to sales पे like it's like much better to value कि price to sales we tend to see, or we also tend to see something which is called as EV to EBITDA, right? The earning
Yes.
before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization.
And sir, if a company is doing good, so is it like matlab static that we have to use the PE ratio or we can use matlab any of the three?
See, it depends upon the company. It depends upon the company. So what did I do in my previous session? Like maybe you can also watch the recording. What I did in my previous session, it was we talked about all these valuation multiples and in which industries you can apply these multiples.
Hmm.
Right? जैसे कि price to earning, many people are using it holistically everywhere. But it's not completely bad, but a better metric is price to book value. When your company is a heavy company, industrial company, or a cyclical company, right? It can be some kind of industrial company, it can be a cement company, it can be a steel company, a defense company, real estate, infrastructure. And these companies have a sufficient quantum of assets with them, right? For all such kind of companies, we never use price to earning. The people who are valuing such companies based upon price to earning are completely wrong because there is a completely different story in terms of valuing such companies based upon a price to book. So, depending upon the type of companies, nature of businesses, the quantum of assets that they have, we tend to change the pricing method. Sometimes price to earning, sometimes price to book, sometimes price to sales, sometimes EV to EBITDA, right? So that logic has been discussed in the previous session. एक बार I would just insist you to watch the previous session का recording. That will make you a certain कि कौन से sectors में या किन type of businesses में कौन से valuation ratios को use करना है, ठीक है?
Okay, sir. And sir, one more doubt related to intrinsic value only.
Hmm.
Like you said, if we are like we calculated our company's like value to be 100, for example, and in the market it's going 120. So is it, matlab, you said this only, right? Ki we have like undervalued, and in the market it's doing good. So it's, matlab, good for our business. And if it's like 90 in the market, then we have overvalued our share.
No, no. I think you understood it vice versa. The thing is, see, if the intrinsic value comes out to be 100, for example, ठीक है, सारे फंडामेंटल्स के बेसिस पे हमें लग रहा है कि कंपनी की मोस्ट अप्रोप्रिएट फेयर वैल्यू शुड बी 100.
Mm,
ठीक है. Analyst is assuming, the company's management is assuming that if we go in the market today, as of today, we go to market, we go to the secondary market, we purchase the share, we should be purchasing this share at 100 rupees only, because that is the most fair intrinsic value of that company. But that might
for
not be the
other company.
of our company only.
Okay.
ठीक है. तो हमारा ये एजम्पशन है. एंड यहाँ पे आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द डीसीएफ मेथड ओनली. राइट,
Mm-hmm.
इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू इज कैलकुलेटेड ओनली इन द डीसीएफ मेथड. आरवी
Mm,
मेथड इज डिफरेंट, वहाँ पे प्राइस टू अर्निंग, प्राइस टू बुक, ये सब आ जाता है. बट यहाँ पे आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द डीसीएफ मेथड ओनली. So as per the DCF method का calculation, those back-end processes that we learn about in the subsequent session, the valuation of the company came out to be 100. Now the underlying assumption is, if I go in the market as of today in the secondary market, I should buy this company which I have valued based upon the DCF method at 100 rupees only. But it's not always possible, right? कि जो हम सोचे मार्केट में वही हो. Correct. We go to the market for that same company. The share is trading at 120 rupees. If the share is trading at 120 rupees based upon some demand and supply conditions, or there might be some positive sentiments about that company, hundreds of reasons can be there. I will have to purchase the share based on 120 rupees only. Correct? I
yes.
can't go to the stock exchanges to BSE and the NSE and file a suit against them. यार मेरी वैल्यूएशन के अकॉर्डिंग तो ये शेयर होना चाहिए 100 रुपए का. तो मैं 100 रुपए पर ही इस शेयर को मैं खरीदूंगा, नहीं कर सकता. राइट. The price is 120. It's trading on whichever kind of a platform you go. You buy via Grow, you buy via Zerodha, Kite app, right? It is trading at 120 rupees. So I need to buy it at 120 rupees only, irrespective of the fact my valuation says 100 rupees. ठीक है. उसको मैंने 120 रुपए पे खरीद लिया. I bought the share at 120 rupees. So can I say the company is overvalued because it's trading at a higher price in the market? My fundamentals, my company's fundamentals are guiding me that the company's value should not be more than 100. 100 रुपए की ही कंपनी की वैल्यू है. मतलब कंपनी डिजर्व्स ओनली 100 rupees in the market to purchase one particular share. But the share is trading at 120 rupees, 20 rupees extra. The company doesn't deserve 120 rupees based upon the fundamentals. Correct?
Mm,
So I can say my share is overvalued in the market. That is, people are willing to pay 20 rupees extra for that company. Correct?
yes.
तो अगर कंपनी महंगे पे मार्केट में बिक रही है, तो there's a very high possibility that 120 will come down to 100 maybe sometime later. And that's the principle of market, right? We tend to call it as mean reversion. Mean reversion बोलते हैं उसको हम. Right? कि the companies have to come back to the fair valuation at a point of time. The market judges the valuation of a company. मार्केट को भी एक टाइम पे ये रियलाइज हो जाता है, ये एहसास हो जाता है कि शेयर तो बहुत महंगा है, इस शेयर को बेच दो. कंपनी के फंडामेंटल्स 120 का प्राइस सपोर्ट नहीं कर रहे हैं. राइट, उस शेयर को बेचते रहो, बेचते रहो, बेचते रहो. अब ये नहीं है कि वो बेचते रहें एंड प्राइस 100 पर ही आके टिकेगा. हाई पॉसिबिलिटी इट विल कम क्लोजर टू 100 रुपीज. करेक्ट. सो करेंटली द वैल्यूएशन और द फंडामेंटल से कि 100 का होना चाहिए, बट द शेयर इज ओवर वैल्यूड इन द मार्केट. एंड द सेकेंड सिनारियो कैन ऑल्सो टेक प्लेस, वाइस वर्सा कैन ऑल्सो हैपन. Ignore 120 as of now. I go in the market at that point of time, the share is trading at 90 rupees. अब मैं बोलूंगा, अब मेरी वैल्यूएशन के हिसाब से तो कंपनी का प्राइस 100 रुपए है. राइट, बट व्हेन आई गो टू द सेकेंडरी मार्केट आई एम परचेजिंग द शेयर, मुझको तो वो सस्ते में मिल रहा है. करेक्ट. मुझको तो
Yes.
शेयर सस्ते में मिल रहा है, जस्ट एट 90 रुपीज. सो नाउ देयर इज अ हाई पोटेंशियल दैट आई परचेज एट 90 रुपीज एंड द शेयर विल कम बैक टू क्लोजर टू 100 एंड आई कैन मेक अ प्रॉफिट. If I purchase one share at 90 rupees, it rose to 98, 99, it closer to 100. I made a profit of 8 rupees.
Mm,
अब एक शेयर पे 8 रुपए का प्रॉफिट कुछ भी नहीं है. But people tend to purchase in bulks, right? They tend to purchase thousands and thousands of shares in lakhs and lakhs of shares they tend to purchase. तो उनका प्रॉफिट भी फिर उतना क्वांटम से मैग्नीफाई होता है. करेक्ट. दैट इज द अंडरलाइंग प्रेमाइस. अब ये दोनों प्रेमाइसेस जो मैंने बोली, both in the case of under valuation as well as over valuation, it might not always stand true. ठीक है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि केवल 90 से 100 पर आएगा ही आएगा 100% गारंटी. राइट. बिकॉज द वैल्यूएशन ऑफ अ कंपनी, equity research report, financial modeling valuation, these are being done based upon assumptions. If I have calculated 100 rupees as the intrinsic value for this company, if you calculate it, Isha, in future, ऐसा नहीं है कि आपका भी आंसर 100 ही आएगा.
Hmm.
करेक्ट. हो सकता है that as per your calculation, as per your assumptions, as per your knowledge, the intrinsic value comes out to be 120 only, right? Or 110 only. And that is why the different analysts of different companies tend to come up with different valuation numbers for a same company only. अगर आज इन्फोसिस का प्राइस, ठीक है, 1500 रुपये मार्केट में चल रहा है अप्रोक्सीमेटली, राइट. सो 1500 rupees, if that is the price for Infosys, JP Morgan might say the fair valuation is 1400. Morgan Stanley might say the fair valuation is 1600. Goldman Sachs might say the fair valuation is 1500 only. Motilal Oswal Asset Management might say the fair valuation is 1700. Now, different organizations, different research companies, asset management companies are coming up with different numbers, right, Isha?
Yes.
So here we can't say na, कि JP Morgan is wrong or like Goldman Sachs is wrong or like Motilal Oswal is wrong. Experienced
Hmm.
people, knowledgeable people, ज्ञानी people are trying to calculate the valuation. But why they are getting the difference? Because they have different assumptions at the back end. कोई assume कर रहा है कि the growth rate of Infosys will be 10%. राइट. कोई assume कर रहा है कि 9% होगा. राइट. कोई assume कर रहा है कि बस 5% होगा. And they have the rationale for that. They have the rationale for that. Why 10, why 9, why 5? Correct? So at the end, after 1 year or 2 year, whatsoever is the valuation of the company, it makes them aware कि मतलब किसकी valuation सबसे ज्यादा ठीक थी, या it was the most closest or appropriate, right? Like though in the market, like no one counts that, so it is all assumptions. It is all assumptions. तो हो सकता है 90 का प्राइस 100 पे कभी आए ही ना. इट माइट गो डाउन एंड द कंपनी माइट टर्न टू बी अ बैंकरप्ट कंपनी. कंपनी खत्म हो जाए. एंड दैट
Hmm.
120 माइट नॉट ऑलवेज फॉल बैक टू 100. It might continue to rise to 140, 150, 160, 180, 200 because the stock is really good. The fundamentals are really very strong. Okay.
Yes, sir. From the buying point of view, we see if the price is like less than what we calculate, then it's good. Like we can get the share at a less price than what it is. So, but if we are seeing from a company's point of view, if, for example, we have like calculated that the value will be 100, but in the market it's like trading for 120, then it's good for company na, that its share is matlab, going at higher price.
It's
It
good
it
for a
might
company.
shift. It might shift as you just explained to me that it will come back to 100 as if you have calculated, or from 90 to close to 100. But from buying point of view, if it's less, like if I am a buyer, then it's good because I know that company share might go high. But for a company's point of view, if the share is trading at a higher price than they calculated, then it's good. Yeah, right? Matlab, I'm just clearing my
You
facts.
got it. You got it completely correct.
Okay, sir. ठीक है. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. And I think that also answered a couple of questions in the chat box also regarding the same. So I won't be stressing much upon it. I'll go ahead. ठीक है. अब whenever we're talking about DCF method of valuation, ठीक है, जब भी हम DCF method of valuation की बात करते हैं, we have two concepts. One is FCFF and the other is FCFE. One is FCFF and the other one is FCFE. FCFF is free cash flow to the firm. Free cash flow to the firm. and FCFE is free cash flow to equity. ओके, इन दोनों के बारे में बात करते हैं. Because you'll be using these cash flows, you'll be calculating these cash flows to ascertain the future value of a company, right? ये चीजें आप करोगे. तो अगर मैं FCFF की बात करूं, फ्री कैश फ्लो टू फर्म, बिकॉज इन 90% ऑफ द केसेस यू शैल बी यूजिंग FCFF ओनली. नाउ व्हाट इज द फॉर्मूला फॉर FCFF? It is EBIT into 1 minus tax. It is EBIT into 1 minus tax. You're adding back for depreciation plus amortization. Here D stands for depreciation, which is charged on fixed assets, on tangible assets. And A stands for amortization, which is charged on intangible assets like patents, copyrights, right? So majorly for asset intensive companies, for asset heavy industries, you will be having depreciation. And for asset light companies like IT companies and all, we shall be having amortization. You subtract your capex. Capex is nothing but your capital expenditure, which we talked about. And again, you subtract your changes in working capital. This triangle, it's called as delta in the field of finance or science. ठीक है, change, this triangle, it represents change, it is delta. So changes in the working capital. We'll try to decode these terminologies one by one, not to worry for that. But ये एक फॉर्मूला है, इसको याद कर लो, इसको try to memorize it. But once you understand FCFF conceptually, you need not even memorize it. It will start to kick in your memory, right? So if we talk about the FCFF, free cash flow to firm, the formula says earnings before interest and tax, EBIT. We all know okay, what is EBIT, right, at this point of time. We talked about EBIT in the financial metrics also, right, in the financial ratios ka session. EBIT is simply your earning before interest and tax, the operating profit of the firm, right? EBIT is simply called as the operating profit of the firm, where the interest and tax has not been subtracted yet. Interest and tax still हमें subtract करना है into 1 minus taxation. That is, we're adjusting this EBIT figure against tax. We are adjusting this EBIT figure against tax. Interest, we are not subtracting. Interest, we are not subtracting. I'll tell you the logic. So before subtracting the interest, we have directly subtracted tax. इंटरेस्ट हमने सब्ट्रैक्ट करा ही नहीं है. इंटरेस्ट है कंपनी में हो या ना हो, हमको मतलब ही नहीं है. इंटरेस्ट हम फॉर्मूले से सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे ही नहीं. द लॉजिक आई विल टेल यू. ठीक है. अब इसके बाद वी आर एडिंग बैक डेप्रिसिएशन एंड वी आर एडिंग बैक एमोर्टाइजेशन. ठीक है, हम डेप्रिसिएशन एंड एमोर्टाइजेशन को ऐड बैक कर रहे हैं. नाउ टिल दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम वी ऑल्सो नो कि व्हाट इज डेप्रिसिएशन एंड व्हाट इज एमोर्टाइजेशन. हमको ये भी पता है, राइट? इसकी हमने बात भी कर ली थी अभी. बट वाई आर वी एडिंग बैक डेप्रिसिएशन एंड एमोर्टाइजेशन? हम डेप्रिसिएशन एमोर्टाइजेशन को ऐड बैक क्यों कर रहे हैं? करेक्ट. हम डेप्रिसिएशन एमोर्टाइजेशन को ऐड बैक इसलिए कर रहे हैं बिकॉज दीज आर नॉन कैश एक्सपेंसेस. दीज आर नॉन कैश एक्सपेंसेस. एंड व्हाट डू आई मीन बाय नॉन कैश एक्सपेंसेस? देखो, जब भी हम कैश फ्लोज निकाल रहे हैं, चाहे फ्री कैश फ्लो टू इक्विटी हो, चाहे फ्री कैश फ्लो टू फर्म हो, but just taking into account the cash flows, actual cash that comes in and actual cash that goes out. Something which is non-cash is ignored. It is added back. Correct? We are excluding the depreciation and the amortization. How do we exclude it? We add back. So we add back the component of depreciation and the amortization because there's a non-cash expense. Because if the value of the machinery tends to come down, no money is going out of your pocket. अगर मैंने 10,000 की मशीनरी खरीदी है and after 2 years the value comes down to 6,000, the value has come to from 10,000 to 6,000, right? 4,000 say, but 4,000 is not going out of my pocket. Correct? It is just the value of the company that has come down. So until and unless I spend some money towards repairs or renewals or maintenance, then it's a cash outflow. Because simply from 10,000 the value has come down to 6,000, there is no cash outflow from my pocket. Correct? And same happens in case of amortization. That happens in case of intangibles, patents, copyrights, trademarks, technology, IT, all those things. Correct? So that is why we tend to add them back. Then you tend to subtract your capex, right? Then you tend to subtract your capex. What is capex? Capex is your capital expenditure. Capex is your capital expenditure, right? And that's the reason I told you that why initially the startup companies or new age companies are loss making companies, because they spend much of the money towards capex. Their cash flows are negative, their profits are negative. Correct? So that is the thing. अब again, capex होता क्या exactly? It is a money like which is being spent. आपको प्लांट खरीदना है, मशीनरी खरीदनी है, right? You want to expand, like build up new factories, new pipelines, infrastructure. That's all is capex. Correct? Now, then you subtract your changes in working capital. इसके बाद you are subtracting your changes in working capital. So what is working capital? Working capital is nothing but it's basically your changes in the net working capital. So net working capital we all know. We try to understand this in the financial ratios का session. For current assets minus current liabilities. It's your net working capital. So मेरा इस साल का जो net working capital है and जो previous साल का net working capital था उसका difference I'm taking here. We'll do such things in Excel also. और जो मेरा इस साल का नेट वर्किंग कैपिटल है और जो मेरा प्रीवियस साल का नेट वर्किंग कैपिटल था उसका डिफरेंस मैंने ले लिया। उसका डिफरेंस मैंने ले लिया। राइट? दैट इज द थिंग। ओके, एनी क्वेश्चंस एज ऑफ नाउ इन द चैट बॉक्स? एनी क्वेश्चंस? ये मैं समझा फ्रॉम अ फॉर्मूला परस्पेक्टिव। कैन यू टेल विच रिपोर्ट स्टैंड अलोन और कंसोलिडेटेड हैज टू बी? Always look at a consolidated report. I was looking for Nestle on its website and a money control. They showed both. No, look at always a consolidated one. All the subsidiaries ka revenue, expenses, P&L, all shall be accounted in that. Okay, so always look for a consolidated report. Any other thing? ठीक है। अब if we talk about free cash flow to firm, it is the total cash flow that is available to all the capital providers. Total cash flow which is available to all the capital providers. Who are the two major capital providers in a company? Equity holders and debt holders. If my company wants to raise money, either I will raise money via equity, right? I will offload the shares in the market. People will purchase those shares, right? And the money I get in the primary market, I can use that money to fund expenditure, capex. Or the second way is via, and the second way is via what? The second way is via debt. I can take a loan from bank. I can take a loan from bank, correct? मैं बैंक से लोन ले लूंगा, या तो मैं बैंक से लोन लूंगा, और आई कैन फ्लोट डिबेंचर्स और बॉन्ड्स इन द मार्केट, राइट? आई कैन इशू सम डिबेंचर और अ बॉन्ड. पीपल विल परचेज दोज फिक्स इनकम सिक्योरिटीज. वो फिक्स इनकम सिक्योरिटीज को परचेज करेंगे, आई विल गेट द मनी, राइट? सॉरी, राइट? दैट्स द थिंग. अब there are two major sources of capital providers. One is equity holders and second one is debt holders. अब ये जो फ्री कैश फ्लो टू द फर्म है is the total cash flow which is available to both the capital providers, your equity holders also and debt holders also. And that is where the formula starts from EBIT, the operating profit. And we have not subtracted the interest because EBIT, the earning before interest and tax, or the operating profit, is something which is available to all the capital providers of the firm. अगर मैं इंटरेस्ट यहाँ से सब्ट्रैक्ट कर देता, अगर मैं EBIT में से if I would have deducted interest, the money, whatever money is left, it would have been available just for the equity holders only. Correct? Because a debt holder, the person who has given debt to the business, is just interested in he's just interested in the interest commitment. He just wants his interest payment back. अगर 10 करोड़ का लोन लिया है, उस पर 5% का इंटरेस्ट है, द बैंक जस्ट वांट द पेमेंट बैक. बैंक को वो मिल रही है, पेमेंट इज हैप्पी. करेक्ट? तो इफ आई वुड हैव डिडक्टेड और सब्ट्रैक्टेड इंटरेस्ट हेयर, if I would have deducted or subtracted interest here, then whatever money is left would have been available only to equity holders, because debt holders must be satisfied. Debt holders will be satisfied because interest has been paid to them. But in case of free cash flow to firm, which is the total value of the cash flow, which is available to all the capital providers of the company, equity holders and debt holders, it is in terms of EBIT. बिकॉज अभी इंटरेस्ट हमने सब्ट्रैक्ट नहीं करा है, ये टोटल कैश फ्लो है जो डेट होल्डर्स को भी मिलेगा एंड इक्विटी होल्डर्स को भी मिलेगा। एंड दैट इज वाई वी टेंड टू नेम इट एज फ्री कैश फ्लो टू फर्म, कि हाउ मच कैश इज अवेलेबल आफ्टर ऑल द कैपेक्स, आफ्टर ऑल द वर्किंग कैपिटल नीड्स के खर्चे करके कंपनी के पास जो बच रहा है। द सेकेंड थिंग दैट कम्स इन टू अकाउंट इज FCFE, as the free cash flow to equity. And as the name suggests, it is the cash flow that is available only to the equity holders. Right? It is a cash flow which is available only to the equity holders. It is only available to the equity holders only. Correct? It means debt holders have been satisfied. That is why the formula begins from PAT, because we have paid the interest to them. And whatever is left is available to the equity holders only. Rest the formula remains the same. We add back the depreciation and the amortization. We subtract the capex. We subtract the changes in the net working capital, and we add net debt. And what is net debt? It is a debt issued minus debt paid. If I have taken a loan of 100 and paid a debt of 50, 100 minus 50 is my net debt. So this net debt is an additional factor जो हम add कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे. Rest the formula is same. So the conceptual wise we need to understand that why in the FCFE we have used PAT, and why in FCFF we have not used PAT and used EBIT only. That's the logic we need to understand. Ab, where FCFF is also called as your unlevered free cash flow. FCFF जो हमने सबसे पहले करा, this FCFF, it's also called as your unlevered free cash flow. Do not get confused. Sometimes people tend to use this terminology in interviews, unlevered free cash flow. Right? Tell us what is unlevered free cash flow, or what's the formula for the unlevered free cash flow. They tend to ask you this. So वहाँ पे we tend to get confused. And the free cash flow to equity is also called as levered cash flow. Right? Free cash flow to equity is also called as the levered cash flow. So these are the two major types of cash flows that we shall be using in the DCF modeling. Any questions as of now? तो ये दो मेजर चीजें हैं that we have to focus upon. In the next session, we shall be talking about the cost of capital. Right? In the next session, we shall be discussing upon the cost of capital, cost of debt, cost of equity. How do we try to devise a blended approach of both the cost of equity and cost of debt, and provide you the weighted average cost of capital WACC, right? How do we calculate WACC? All these things we'll try to talk about. Any questions as of now, anybody can put in the chat box or ask me to unmute. I'll be happy to undertake. If no other questions, we can end the session for today, and subsequently we'll get back in the next session. नेट डेट आइडियली FCFE की जब हम बात कर रहे हैं ना, नेट डेट की जब हम बात कर रहे हैं, राइट? सो आइडियली द थिंग इज वी आर ट्राइंग टू शो टू द पर्सन हु इज यूजिंग FCFE, करेक्ट, कि नेट डेट का इम्पैक्ट हैज बीन टेकन इनटू अकाउंट in terms of how much debt we have and how much debt has been paid. Right? So again, we're adding back that net debt because we want to exclude the impact of debt. Correct? We want to exclude the impact of debt because debt holders have been paid now. They're satisfied. Correct? Debt holders have been paid. They're satisfied. Correct? That is why we're adding back net debt to ignore the impact of debt in the formula, in the calculation. We'll do numericals upon it later also. Right? We'll do numericals on this, and we have just covered 5% of DCF today. Just 5% of DCF. We're yet to cover more in the subsequent sessions. Majorly हम next session में discuss करेंगे. Today I've set the foundation. ठीक है? Next session में we'll go deep dive and continue watching the modules. You can be ahead of me if you watch the modules. And I always stress people to have watched the modules. वो करते रहो, लाइव सेशंस की वेट मत करो, बिकॉज मेनी ऑफ द कॉन्सेप्ट्स विल बी क्लियर्ड इन द मॉड्यूल्स एंड इट विल बी अ रिविजन और अ मच बेटर लर्निंग हियर इन द लाइव सेशंस। ठीक है, तो वो भी करते रहो। दैट इज व्हाट आई हैड टू से। विल मीट इन द सब्सिक्वेंट सेशन गाइस। थैंक यू, थैंक यू सो मच।